Good morning, everyone. This is Unit Three's video discussion around risk management. Risk management is the ability to balance the having too much risk, which could leave your company vulnerable if the project should fail, and just enough, not enough, like where you don't have any risk, and you're really kind of staying at the status quo, not really having any huge gains, because the adage says with risk, great risk comes great reward. So it's the balancing act between that to try to identify the risk you have and then make a determination is worth is the potential gains worth the risk. So risk versus reward in that sense. So there are five aspects, or excuse me, uh, components to risk: risk identification, risk measurement and assessment, risk mitigation, risk reporting and monitoring, and then risk governance. So those aspects all are basically the different steps that you would take in your identifying risk. Coming up with a plan to mitigate that risk, coming up with a plan to report that risk or assess that risk or monitor that risk, and then ultimately when those risks, those things that you thought could happen do happen, what you do in that regard. If there's an unforeseen risk, something like that, how do you handle that, with going back to the stakeholders, or do you you know is there a plan of action for how to take that? So I think that looking at this, just basically kind of boils it down. The most important people in this communication plan uh, that you would use for your risk, and why it's important is the communication plan basically gives you the guidelines of how you're going to report things, and when you're going to report them, who you're going to report them to, what needs to be reported, and in what format. It gives you all those guidelines, so it makes it very simple, so that you just you can focus on what's happening instead of how am I going to tell this person, what do I need to say. You kind of have all that already built out, so that you could just say, like, okay, for this, if they're wanting to do this, the customer's wanting to do this, what are we going to do, and how do we do that? If this happens, what are we going to do, and how do we deal with that? That's kind of how you kind of set up your communications plan as it deals with risk. So I think the most important people or group of people in that communication plan are obviously the stakeholders, because they're going to be the decision makers. If something happens that's unforeseen, then they need to be notified so they can make a decision. On what depending on what options you give them. So you come to them with options and say, we can do option A or we can do option B, and then they make a decision based on what you give, or they make another suggestion decision, maybe give you an option C or D. Um, in addition, like, they're the ones that are, writing the checks to pay the bills, so they're important, because without the stakeholders, why are we even doing this? So that's my thought process and take on this. Let me know what you guys think.